Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast.
Hey there, Karma Crew. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Mind Your Own Karma, the Adoption Chronicles. I am welcoming Russell Girten to the show today. Let me tell you a little bit more about Russell. Russell is an adoptee whose birth certificate was issued 9 days after he was born. He first was told that he was adopted at age 23. And when he began to tell his family and friends he was adopted, the common response was, "I'm so glad they finally told him." Russell didn't have a strong desire to meet his biological family, but when he was 56, a close match on 23andMe led him to them and unlocked the story of his biological family. It helped him reframe his story and expose him to the reality he was adopted from. Although Russell's adoptive parents provided him with many of the things necessary for him to bloom, his story includes abuse, neglect, and fear. His story may not be for everyone. He was adopted in South Carolina, a closed adoption state, and it's an issue that he's faced. Although there are challenges with the impact of his adoption and his life journey, Russell couldn't be happier that he was adopted. He works in volunteer roles that help children who have experienced displacement and trauma find their forever homes. Here is my interview with Russell Girten. We are welcoming Russell Girten to the show today. Hi, Russell.
Hi, Melissa.
How are you doing today?
God, it may be cloudy outside and rain may be coming down, but it's such a great opportunity to be with you and talk about something that's so important to me.
Yeah, awesome. You have a great story. I can't wait to have other people relate to it. So I kind of start usually with the adoptee story, but you have a little bit of a different story. You were a late discovery adoptee. So I kind of want to flip it a little bit. So tell us how you were told that you were adopted and what age were you and what happened?
Well, so let me clarify a little language first. I refer to my adoptive parents as my parents. And I also refer to my siblings as sisters and brothers.
Your
Somebody
adoptive
told,
siblings.
yeah.
Okay.
Somebody told me once that nobody wants to be a half of anything.
Yeah.
And I and so I've adopted that, and it's worked well for me. So
Okay.
my mother passed when she was 49. I
Mm.
was 20 at the time, and after that, my father had some challenges. He had challenges at work. He had challenges in relationship. Yeah, but my mother and father got married when he was 20 and she was 18, so he didn't have much adult experience.
Yeah.
And when my mom passed, that really caused some challenges in his life. So he was given an opportunity to change careers or enter counseling. He chose counseling at that point in his life. And he'd been doing it for a while. I'm not sure how long, but he invited me one day. And so I went and wanted to let him know all the ways that he failed me as a father so that he
Mm.
could work on them. And so I went to his counseling session, and the counselor said, "Do you have anything you want to say to your father?" I spent the next 45 minutes unloading 20 years, 23
Wow.
years of angst.
Mm.
And when it comes to my father, he grew up without a father. He didn't have a positive pattern. He wasn't particularly interactive, and he wasn't emotionally expressive at all. He had learned that those were dangerous things.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I finished my 45-minute lecture, I paused, and I was so satisfied because I'd been able to vent all of this that had happened. And the therapist looks at my father and asked him, "Well, is there anything you want to tell your son?" And there was a pause, and I started to get concerned. My whole body started to tingle. I wanted to get out of that room.
Yeah.
And my father looked at me and he said, "Russell, you're adopted." And my response was to laugh because I had always felt different. I'd always
Mm.
felt like there was a lack of fit. I took that out into the community and the world, just that perception that I'm not going to belong here.
Yeah.
And when I heard from my father that I was adopted, there was such a relief because finally there was an explanation about what went on in
Mm,
my life that was really helpful to me
wow.
in understanding how I fit in the world and what my place in the world looked like. Now, I immediately went home and called a woman that I used to live with. And I said, "You'll never believe what my father told me today." And she said, "Oh, did he finally tell you you're adopted?" And, and
What?
that shifted things for me quite a bit because I didn't expect to be the last one in my family system to know that I was adopted. So
Yeah.
I asked her how where she had heard that from. She said, "Well, one of your cousins pulled me aside one day and asked if anybody had ever told me."
Oh my gosh.
And so the tables had certainly turned in both of those moments. They were important in understanding the world that I lived in. And,
Yeah.
and as I think about that world today, it feels to me like a world of mistruth and a world of lies and a world of secrets and a world that can't be trusted.
Hmm.
And it certainly enhanced some of the impact that comes with being adopted and finding your way through the primal wound and those kinds of things.
Yeah. So unwrap that a little bit. So in the moment when you found out, you're probably kind of in disbelief and then finding out that everybody knew except for you. How did you process that? What emotions were you going through and how did you process?
Well, the idea of being adopted was okay for me because it provided an explanation to some of the troubles I had in life, some of the friction that I had in life. And so that was a really positive item. When it comes to the fact that my family knew and I didn't, it sowed a lot of distrust.
Hmm.
I didn't know how good my family was at keeping secrets. And it certainly was a real life lesson for me in learning what's possible in a family.
Yeah.
It was
That's
interesting because when I asked my father why he didn't tell me until I was in my mid 20s, and he said, "Well, I was afraid it would screw you up, and I didn't want you to be screwed up. And you're old enough now that, yeah, it's certainly not going to have that effect on you."
wow.
Yeah, and yeah, it pointed out a level of misalignment between my parents because he told me, your mother always wanted to tell you.
Mm,
I didn't. And, she honored that request to the grave,
yeah.
which I
Wow.
don't, I certainly couldn't imagine myself doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised that, like you said, that they were able to keep it for that long, everybody, when your whole family knows. It's like
Right.
that someone didn't slip. So that brings up a question. When do you think kids should be told they were adopted?
Oh, I think kids should always know they're adopted. I love the stories that appear on your podcast where the adoptee says, "I always knew."
Yeah.
For the explanation, for the truth in navigating difficulties in life, for the ability to build a relationship with the adopted parents that are built on truth. One of the things that I've seen in my time as I've gotten to know other adoptees is that there seems to be a perception in the world that adoption solves everything for a child.
Yeah.
That if I place a child with a family that has stability, that's going to fix everything. And that certainly isn't my experience. And it may occur quite often, but I don't see that in the real world.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work that has to go on beyond placement in order to nurture the relationship and in order to nurture identity, in order to nurture connection, and in order to nurture validation, to provide security and safety. And
Right.
unless those items are addressed in a deliberate way, they just, in my experience, they don't happen.
Right. So let's talk about your experience. What was it like growing up adopted, but not knowing you were adopted?
Right. Well, and what's super interesting to me, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, when we get to my reunification story. But I don't know the circumstances of my adoption. I know that my father worked with with a man who uh, found his wife with a baby. But I know that my birth certificate is an original birth certificate with both of my adopted parents listed as parents.
Hmm.
And I know that, and I know that the courts around the area where I was born and in the state where I was born don't have cases filed around my birth that would have relinquished me or would have put me in permanent placement with another family. So I'm curious about that.
Hmm.
And there's certainly more to talk about there. But the first story in my family of my adoption was when I was 2 years old. And when I came to my mother, my father was in Vietnam. And I didn't meet him until 2 years after I was adopted.
Wow.
And he came home from Vietnam and arrived in the family. And I hid. I hid for 2 weeks.
Oh my
And
gosh.
you don't have a lot of resources when you're two to hide. So the family story is that I would hide under beds. I would hide rolled up in long drapes. I would hide anywhere I could. And it's been brought to my attention that most children in that kind of situation will will move toward their mother.
Mm,
And that's not something I did.
interesting. Yeah.
I hid.
Yeah.
And coming away from that, even at that early age with no resources, one of the things that I learned was that I was responsible for my own safety and security, that I couldn't look to other people for that, and that there was no one in my life who would give that to me.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a strong foundational story of why I can be detached from time to time, why I can avoid relationships, why I might be attachment avoidant from time to
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
And so it's really helpful for me to get that foundational understanding.
Yeah. So how was it growing up then, in that family? And did you have siblings in that family? You said you did.
No, no, I have no siblings
Oh,
from
you
my
don't.
adopted family. I was raised as
Okay.
an only child.
Okay.
It's so interesting to me to see the ways that my adoption came out in my life, whether or not I knew it was there.
Hmm.
When I was four, one of the things that happened in my family was that my maternal grandfather and my paternal grandmother died within 2 weeks of each other.
Wow.
And one of the things that my family chose to do was not have me at any of the funerals. And so, I learned a couple of things. Number one, there are things that we don't talk about. Number two, there are things that we keep secret.
Mm,
As I look at how that's affected my life as I've come out of adoption fog, it's really allowed me to do is yeah, temper things so that I'm presenting them appropriately for the audience that I'm in relationship with, or the audience that I'm talking to, and keep out those things that would be inappropriate. But at the time, it encouraged me to hide everything because I didn't know what was good to talk about, what was bad to talk about. what we allowed to exist in our family and what we didn't.
Yeah.
It,
So, in what ways did you see adoption shaping you as an adult?
as an adult, yeah, certainly through my 20s, 30s, 40s, it was difficult for me to form long-lasting relationships, to trust fully, to hold space. One of the things that I learned early in life was that to get positive attention, yeah, if I were entertaining, if I were smart, if I knew things other people didn't know, then I could get positive attention. Now, when you bring those things into adulthood, it's an absolute train wreck.
Yeah.
And so, it was impossible for me to do the necessary work to to learn how to deal with those things. And so when I came into adulthood, for me, I brought those things with me and had to learn in a much more challenging environment.
Yeah. So you found out you're adopted, and right away, did you, start thinking about your biological family? What happened with that part of it?
Now, one of the things that I hear over and over on your podcast is, yeah, where are the men?
Yeah.
And, and and it's interesting because as I've talked to other adoptees, other male adoptees, a lot of them take the same point of view that I took, and that is, I don't want to disturb my life as it exists today, and I don't want to disturb someone else's life. And so I hear from men much more that, I don't want to intrude on somebody else's life that's already established. I'm sure they're doing just fine.
Hmm.
And so for me, I carried that attitude. One of the things about for me as an adoptee is I created a lot of stories. I created stories about my origin. I created stories about me and why I was relinquished. I created stories about how my biological family moved forward, and all of them were important for me. They were all wrong, but they were all important in me having some kind of foundation.
Yeah. Surviving. Yeah.
Mm, mm.
So did you ever search? And if you did, what kind of was the catalyst for that?
Oh, I didn't search. At least I didn't intentionally search. When I turned 50, my now ex-wife thought it was very important to have all those medical tests that you're supposed to have when you turn 50. I wasn't particularly interested.
Mm.
And my proposal to her was that I could take a 23andMe test and it would at least reveal any genetic defects or predispositions.
Yeah.
And we agreed that that would be sufficient for me to avoid a trip to the doctor. So I did that in 2017, and it was out there. It sat there. There was additional, genetic traits that came forward, but it sat. I looked at it maybe once a year and looked at the DNA relative section on 23andMe. The closest that I ever got was yes, third cousins
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. So I didn't know how if that would ever prove any fruit in finding my biological family. And so I just let that sit. Now,
And yeah, go ahead.
moving forward to 2022, I had someone show up as a DNA relative. It was a first cousin, and I had never had a first cousin show up before, so that was interesting to me.
Hmm.
But as I looked at her, she was too young to be a cousin, and so yeah, what do you take from that? And
Yeah.
what I took from it was that she was old enough to be a niece.
Hmm.
And if there was a niece, there had to be a mother. And so that started my reunification story.
You reached out to her or?
I reached out to her. I said, "You're my first cousin. I think you're my first cousin. Would you mind having your mom do a kit?"
Mm,
And so this was in February of 2022. And she said, "Sure, of course, I'll have my mom do a kit."
wow. So you told her you were adopted and that whole
No,
story, or
no, it was just
no?
I think you're my niece. Um, I'd be interested to know if your mother is my sister, and then things took off from there.
So she took the test,
Well, she took the
or did
test.
she?
She took the test in September. And I didn't think about much about it. The assumption that I made is that for someone to show up out of the blue is a disruptive thing, and whether or not she took the test, at least I was connected to a niece, and I knew a part of my biological history.
Yeah. I had a recent match. I have four first cousins on Ancestry.
Hmm.
One of them is a niece for sure. The other three, I don't know who they are. The last names don't match like my biological parents. So I did last week sent them messages and have heard nothing back from the three of them.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Congratulations for the courage to do that. I mean, I think that's a super courageous thing to do.
Yeah, I was surprised though that like nobody like when I come up on their list as a first cousin, don't they wonder like who's that? We don't know who that person is. Well, they do
Right.
now,
Right.
but
And
I
so
just think it's weird.
well, yeah, but it's amazing that you're in a place where you can do that outreach, because
Yeah,
that was something I didn't look for a path to do.
yeah. Well, and I don't know how long they sat there. They've been there a while, I think too. This isn't something new. They've been sitting there, but yeah, I just one day was like, why don't I want to know. I want to know.
What would
You
it
know,
be like for you to discover a first cousin, a new first cousin?
That would be, I think it would be really cool because I don't have, I know my siblings, my half siblings, but, no extended past that at all.
Hmm.
And, it's been a little bit of, questioning about my paternal, if that was really my paternal side through some things. But I find that he was my, paternal dad. So, I do know those are my sisters from him, but like I said, I don't know any extended family past that. So I just kind of was interested. If someone else was interested, I would be interested. I've been through
Yeah.
a few reunions and I know how it can be. But I don't know. I just thought it would be cool to reach out and just see what they said because don't know what side they're on or anything. So I don't recognize the last names. But
Mm.
yeah, so
Well, I
that's
wish you the
another
best.
thing. I'm like, I don't recognize any of these names.
I truly wish you the best of luck
Yeah.
in that reunification. I
Yeah.
have found a lot of value in that
Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about, so did you find out anything from the DNA?
I had this expectation that nothing would happen, and then all of a sudden, in August, I get a message from my niece, and she said, "Things have been really busy around here. Sorry, we haven't done a kit, but we're doing it right now." My response to that was, "Oh, sure, I'm sure you are." And but then, but then in late October, I had a sister show up on 23andMe.
Wow.
And I had never had a sister before. I had no idea what it was like to have a sister.
Yeah.
And so we connected, and she was so open with the facts of my maternal biological family. And she was very open with the great things about my biological mother, as well as some of the challenges that my biological mother had.
Mm.
She painted the picture, and I found that I was fifth of seven
Oh
from
my
my biological
goodness.
mother.
I was just going to ask if you were the oldest because we always assume we were the oldest.
Well, yeah, because the perfect adoption story is two teenagers who got in trouble.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And that wasn't my experience. What I found out in my experience is that my biological father was 31. My biological mother was 27 when I was born.
Okay.
So it was a late traverse, a late adoption or a late birth for both of them.
So number 5 out of 7, you said.
Hmm.
Was anyone else adopted of
Yeah.
those?
Well, this is, and so let's talk about my biological mother's story. And what I'm told about my biological mother is that she was a bit of a party girl, and she really liked being a party girl.
Mm.
Now, she grew up in difficult circumstances. One of the items that I've been able to uh, get some fact behind, some documentation behind, is one of the things that her mother did because she thought her husband was cheating on her was feed him ground glass in his evening meals, and that ground glass killed him.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. And
What?
so there were, she went through the judicial system as part of that. She was acquitted of any charges that she faced, but she needed somebody who could be a provider in her family.
Hmm.
And so she quickly remarried, looking only for a provider. And that was my biological grandfather. So there
Wow.
wasn't a lot of intimacy. There wasn't a lot of emotion between the two of them. And that had an impact on my biological mother.
Yeah.
So when she had her first two children, those two children went to my biological grandmother, so that my biological mother could continue to do what she needed to do in order to uh, feel happy in her life.
Yeah.
And after that, uh, at some point, she became married. And in that marriage, she had two children. Those two children weren't for her, and they were placed with their biological father's family
Mm.
in Texas.
Okay.
And then number five came along, and it's been interesting to investigate that story because part of my search has revealed not just who my biological mother is, but also who my biological father is. My biological father was separated from his wife, but his wife was still curious about what was going on with him. One night, drove by what had been their shared house. Uh, my biological stepmother went through a window and found my biological father and biological mother on the floor of the living room.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't know how I feel about having someone witness my creation, but that's
Yeah.
certainly how it
Right.
happened in my case. But
Oh my gosh.
it's a very validating thought as well for me to know that someone actually saw them together, somebody actually knew them together, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So did you meet any other biology? Now, I'm assuming, are you both your parents passed? Your
My my
biological?
my biological parents have both passed. My biological father passed in 1996, and my biological mother passed in 2014.
Okay. So you didn't get to meet them.
No, no.
Any other siblings that you've been able to connect?
Yeah, I've connected with a number of my siblings. On my maternal side, I've had a chance to meet uh, three biological sisters. Both of my biological brothers on my maternal side are passed.
Mm.
I also have a biological sister that is in the custody of the state in which she lives, and so I haven't been able to meet her. But none of my biological siblings, whether they're maternal or paternal, knew of my existence.
Oh, wow.
My biological mother was not around any of the children that she had, so there was no recognition there. And the supposition that my biological paternal family has is that my biological father was never told.
Mm.
One of my younger sisters was adopted
Mm.
as well. Yeah, and all of that material is part of the court record. Uh, and uh, and so we've been able to share stories about being adopted in that case, and those have been helpful and reassuring.
And how did the reunion go? How are the relationships now? And
So two things that I would call out. Number one, I talked to a friend of mine who's adopted prior to my reunification, and I love what he said when he told me, whatever you're expecting, it won't happen that way. And that certainly was the case. And what that allowed me to do was enter into my adoption journey in a way that was freed of expectation.
Mhm.
And what I find is that one of my biological sisters is the family historian, and she's amazing for facts and figures and
Nice.
where people came from and where they were buried and all of that kind of information. And I'm so grateful for her.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened when I started discovering my biological family is that people were so open with pictures. Prior to reconciliation, the only person that I was biologically connected to was my son.
Mhm.
And in my bedroom, even today, I have a picture of my son at 6 and a picture of me at 6.
Mm.
And they sit side by side so that I can experience the fact that
Yeah.
I look like somebody.
Yeah.
And I love, love, love that.
Did you look like anyone when you met your siblings? Did you see?
Funny enough, yes. When I met my siblings, this is the first time that I looked like anyone.
Yeah.
And so, I have some traits from my maternal side. One of the things that is unique to that side is that there's some African American heritage that's there, and so we match in things like skin tone, hair color, eye color, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
On my paternal side, my paternal father was Lithuanian, and as pictures started coming in, I put them on a wall in my house. So I have a wall in my house that I call family wall
Mm.
that has everyone that I know in my constellation and have pictures of, which really helps ground me in my adoption, right? I can see the people who exist in my life. I can see what they look like. I can be a part of that experience, and it's really comforting to me. So I have a sister that's a historian. But one of the things that I found on my maternal side was that, you know, well, and on both sides, is that the family is a family of lies, right?
Mm.
Everything is built on lies about who we are, who we've been, what got us to the place where we are. And some of that shows up in my siblings. And the first line of defense comes from things that aren't true.
Yeah.
Um, and which is really unfortunate for an adoptee,
Mhm.
because if you're already living in shifting sand,
Yeah.
um, how helpful is it to have that shifting sand grow in magnitude?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so some of that goes on, but the reunion that has been most significant, and this is not to say, I have a couple of sisters that I really love and care for. My relationship with my niece on my maternal side is particularly important to me. But it was interesting when I first talked to my biological brother, and he's on my paternal side. He felt like a brother from the moment we first talked. At least what I
Oh,
would imagine a brother to feel like.
yeah. Wow.
there was a depth in our conversation. There was significance in our conversation. Even life experiences were similar in a lot of ways. And that was spectacular for me because it helped me understand that I belong. It helped me understand that there are people who love and care about me in the world, even if they haven't met me. It helped me understand that yeah, I could be accepted and should be accepted.
Yeah. How was it for him, do you think, finding out about you?
It was a surprise. He didn't know that I existed. But he's been very open to it. You know, he has taken the approach that DNA doesn't lie, and that's been a great approach for me. Whenever we talk, our conversation starts with the word brother from
Mm,
either one of us.
yeah.
And it's nice to be a part of that.
When you were adopted, did you live near any of your family and not know it, your
N-
biological family?
No, one of the things that's come out of my adoption is I have a lot of geographic independence. Yeah, I've lived all over the US. I've lived abroad a few times, which has been great for me and helping round
Yeah.
me out as a person. But my biological family is in South Carolina. It's very odd to me because they all live in a 10-mile radius of each other.
Well,
And I don't get that. I don't understand that. I don't know how a person lives in the same place for their entire life. But they're still close by. They're still close by each other.
so after meeting your biological family, in your opinion, do you feel that adoption can be a substitute for a child's family of origin?
I don't think so. And when I say substitute, right, is it an identical match? My experience is that it's not, right? The But what I do believe is that adoption, for me, has helped me develop characteristics, whether it's resourcefulness or creativity or the ability to be entertaining or the ability to show off that I might be smart or that I can create a healthy family. My adoption has given me a platform to develop those skills and be that person in the world.
Hmm.
And that's been very, very significant for me. What I, you know, if I were to imagine, one of the things that I would love for my parents to have done is to encourage more of that for me. Instead, what my adoption experience was one of emotional neglect and physical abuse,
Mm,
and and that didn't support me in my growth.
yeah.
And my wish for my future and for other adoptees is to have parents who don't point out the differences, but point out the similarities
Hmm.
and how a child's identity and how a child's character help them succeed in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So you touched on the fog a little bit. Talk about that. When did you come out of the fog? Was there something that kind of catapulted that happening?
One of the things I've heard your guests say over and over is that the journey isn't linear,
Yeah.
and mine certainly hasn't been
Hmm.
linear at all. Uh, uh, yeah, I feel like I'm in a good place now with regard to the fog, but the way that it showed up for me earlier in life was an assumption I didn't belong, an assumption I couldn't be safe, an assumption that I was vulnerable, an assumption that I didn't have uh, access to resources. And one of the most debilitating insights in the fog that I developed was that I was only lovable conditionally, that
Mm,
I had to behave in a certain way, be a certain person in order to be loved. And for
Yeah.
me, that was terrible. I didn't have the ability to be that person. And so those were all significant elements in the fog. And as I think about leaving the fog, I think about a couple of things. Number one, I think about the characteristics that I developed. I'm primarily responsible for my safety. I can choose to surround myself with people who love and care for me. That true love isn't conditional.
Mm-hmm.
And those items have all been important to me. My leaving the fog, started pretty quickly after I was told that I was adopted because it explained things for me. And when those things clicked, that was important for me.
Yeah.
But there were times that I went back in the fog
Mm-hmm.
and saw myself as not a great employee, not qualified for my job. We've talked about imposter syndrome on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That was a part of my story. One of the most significant was that I didn't feel like I could count on myself to live life as an adult. And although parts of my life took on characteristics of living as an adult, I was 39 years old before I got married. And that is a part of my adoption legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that we can heal from the primal wound?
Oh my, yeah, well, I hate to I hate to quote Law and Order as a psychological reference. But there was a thing in one season of Law and Order. Olivia had had a sexual problem, and she was talking to someone in the next season about that. And and the character that she was talking to said, "Will I ever get over being raped?"
Mm.
And Olivia looked at her and said, "I don't know it works that way, but you can learn to live with it."
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's the same way for the primal wound. I can recognize that there's something happening in my life and in my mind that could be affected by my origin, and I can live with that. I know what to do when it comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it doesn't have the same triggering impact that it might, and cause me to become emotionally overwhelmed.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think is so important is, when I think about therapeutic relationships that I've had, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I treated those therapeutic relationships as a way to stop the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I thought about them. And when the pain stopped, I twaddled off and lived my life the way I chose to live my life because I wasn't in that same pain. But I was listening to Dr. Drew once, and he was talking about his therapeutic journey. And he was talking about having been in therapy for 7 years. And I said, and that seemed almost impossible to me. Why would you do that? And what I found is that, in leaving the fog, for me, it's not sufficient to stop the pain. Really, what I want to do is I want to take my adoption and I want it to be a positive in my life. I want to celebrate my creativity. I want to celebrate my ability to work with others. I want to celebrate the fact that I'm an advocate for people who've had challenging origin stories themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's doing that extra work, that extra step beyond uh, causing the pain to subside that has been so important to me.
Yeah. What has helped you personally in your healing process?
Well, first and foremost, I would say living in the truth
Mm-hmm.
and finding that truth, continuing to dig for that truth, to challenge things that feel untrue has been important in my healing. I would also say celebrating me. And one of the things that I believe is that we were all created for a unique purpose.
Yeah.
And if we don't live out that unique purpose, then we're shortchanging ourselves, we're shortchanging the world.
Mm-hmm.
And identifying that purpose and those purposes over time. For me, that's been serving others. For me, that's been holding space for other people. It's been uh, having the ability to advocate for people who have worked through similar situations. Certainly being a parent have all been a part of the positive that's come out, and living that out, celebrating it and savoring the good has been absolutely critical for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, Melissa, what is it about your adoption that you'd celebrate, that you celebrate the most?
Um, I through the journey of, becoming who I've become now, um, which was something that I wouldn't want to relive, but it was all worth it. um, every bit of it I cherish each part of it as being a superpower for me. Anything I've overcome has become a superpower for me. And I always look for what can I learn from it and what can I tell others that are in the same spot so they don't have to dwell in it as long as I did, because I could be pretty stubborn and just try and make it work, and sit there somewhere where the universe is saying, you need to get out. We've been telling you for like 10 years, you need to move, and you're still here. So we're going to make you move. I'm that person. I think it's part of, I don't like change. I think that's part of being adopted. I don't like change. And when you were saying you moved a lot, see, now for me, I've lived in Modesto for, since I was 6 years old, pretty much, or right around here. I don't like to move. I don't like anything new. I don't want to learn anything new. I've been at the same job for 33 years. So that's part of it. But getting back to your question, yeah, I just see it all as how can it benefit me? Because I went through this for a reason. There was a
Hmm.
purpose in it. And so I want to learn as quickly as I can through the process and get to the other side. And then again, just and help people that want to be helped, that want that help, because some people don't, you
Hmm.
know, they don't.
Well, it's a threat to a person's safety and security, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
It is scary
and
and
I
can
can
be
be
not fun.
yeah, and I can be particularly sensitive to those things.
Hmm.
And it's good for me to be aware of that, that
Yeah.
that change can affect me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um, you know, if you think about the experiences you've been through and the gifts that those experiences have allowed you to develop, is there one that stands out to you
Mm.
as being something you're most proud of, most significant to you?
I think even as a kid, when people would ask you what you wanted to be when you grow up, I always said like a nurse, like
Hmm.
that's inherent in me to help people. And that thread has been throughout my entire life. And it's morphed over the years. I've been in
Hmm.
ultrasound for 33 years, and have been very disappointed in healthcare and what it's turned into.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's why I'm getting into the somatic work now, because I see patients come in over and over again, having thousands of tests, and everything looks fine,
Hmm.
and they can't figure out why they feel so bad, and
Hmm.
so the somatic part of it, I think, is huge as far as that, as health wise. I don't think people realize how much life and how you're programmed as a kid and all of that, and how you become unauthentic through those
Hmm.
experiences, um, how that affects your body and how you
Hmm.
feel. and can cause disease in your body. So I think that thread's been there, but it's just like I said, it's morphed and grown and over the years through what I've gone through. So
Mm, mm.
yeah,
Yeah, and I can certainly see it as a superpower that you recognize people need help
yeah,
and
yeah.
you're willing to step into that. I just find that so comforting, so amazing to see.
Well, you kind of do that too. I mean, you're advocate for people that have gone through some stuff too. So I'm sure that's kind of stemmed from you being adopted too and having
Mm,
that need. I mean, that was an innately placed in you from probably before birth, you
mm, mm.
know.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to see how that's shown up for me over the years.
Yeah.
One of the most rewarding service positions that I've ever had in my life has been to be a teacher in the 3-year-old room.
Mm.
And I particularly gravitated to the kids who were the criers because I certainly understood the need for
Yeah.
comfort, the need for
Hmm.
safety when you're separated from mom,
Hmm.
the need to have an understanding voice, and the need to provide support to walk through that.
Yeah. Wow.
It's
Yeah.
it's amazing to me, Melissa, when you talk about somatic work. Somatic work has been a really important part of my journey because I learned to keep everything in my head.
Mm.
And when I was growing up, I heard we don't feel that way. It's not okay to cry.
Yeah.
We behave this way in this situation. We don't challenge authority. All of those things. And as a child, I certainly didn't have resources to deal with that. The only resource that I had was me. And so what I learned to do was keep all of life in my head. And it was a
Yeah.
logical puzzle to be figured out.
Hmm.
And to allow that to happen, I had to learn to compartmentalize or avoid the feelings that showed up in my body, whether it was generalized anxiety or whether it was IBS or whatever it was. I learned to ignore that,
Hmm.
or I learned there was a tablet for that.
Yeah.
And having someone to work with as I learned to listen to what my body was telling me. That when my stomach churned, it churned for a reason. And
Mm.
when my intestines clenched, it was for a reason. And when I had a cold sweat, it was for a reason.
Yeah.
And when I flushed, it was for a reason.
Right.
All of those learnings to me, number one, noticing that those things were happening. And
Exactly.
number two, learning what they meant and what to do with them was so important because my body will tell me things, my mind won't.
Hmm. Yeah.
And my body will tell me faster than my mind will because my body doesn't have the 8 layers of protective parts to get through to deliver a message to
Exactly.
me.
Exactly.
And that has been so important to me. And trust your gut is no longer a trite phrase to me. It
Right.
really means something.
Yeah. What kind of therapy did you do?
Oh,
Somatic therapy.
I've done some of that. I've done some EFT. I've done some DBT. I've done some EMDR. All have had their place. What I find most effective for me now is internal family systems work,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I find that to be really helpful to identify my parts,
Yeah.
develop relationships with them, love them, thank them for all they've done
Yep.
for me,
Yeah.
and find some common ground.
Yeah.
For me, a big part of getting through the fog is learning that the experiences that shaped me when I'm younger, I'm no longer exposed to.
Hmm.
And IFS really helps me in those situations.
Yeah. Somatic mindful guided imagery is very similar to that modality and
Hmm.
what I've researched on it. Um, yeah. Um,
What do you find to
I
be most helpful as as people are preparing to enter into listening to their body more?
I was going to ask you, what was it like the first time you like felt into your body?
Oh,
what was that like?
I always
Were
say
you
the same thing.
terrified?
I say, I hate this.
Yeah.
I hate this. This is the worst. I
I
feel
know.
my stomach turning right now, and I don't like it happening, right?
Yeah,
Or I
right.
feel myself getting lightheaded, and I'm not all the way present, and I feel vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah.
All those things happen. What I do know is that they're happening for a positive reason,
Right.
and I can accept that they're happening for a positive reason. One of the most, oh, I don't know, challenging parts of that journey for me to remember is to remember to thank that feeling
Hmm.
that it's showing up in my life.
The validation.
Yeah, and then letting it go,
Yeah.
because I can dwell and grind on something that I believe to be negative input.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I do, because in my family of origin, having too much of emotional highs or too much of emotional lows was a dangerous place to be.
Hmm.
It's very easy for me to mute a positive experience,
Mm.
and listening to my body and encouraging my body to express joy, to express calm, to express happiness has been an important part of that journey as well,
Yeah.
and partnering with my body more.
It's funny how those feelings feel uncomfortable
Mm.
and kind of unsafe sometimes, for
It sounds like
adoptees.
that. Sounds like that's shown up for you. Has it?
Yeah. Yeah.
How's it shown up for you?
Um, oh my gosh. Like you were saying, the highs and the lows, I think for me, and maybe this is part of being in medical too, but I always the one that's the calm, in the storm when there's a health crisis or something's going on. I'm always the one running to the health
Hmm.
problem or whatever.
Hmm.
I was at a restaurant the other night and this guy ran out and he was outside clenching his chest and I looked at my boyfriend. I'm like, should I go out there? And he's like, well, do what you need to do. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, so I go out there, but most people are like, I don't, and even the owners of the restaurant were like standing far away on the phone calling 911. And I'm like, I'm in there, you
Oh, I
know,
love that.
but that's, I don't know. I feel like that's just an innate thing, even if I'm not a doctor. I feel like, I know CPR, like I could be here with you and your
Hmm.
wife till the ambulance comes or, whatever. Um,
Well,
but
what
yeah,
I find super interesting in that story is your calm in chaos.
yeah.
And as I talk to
It
adoptees,
doesn't hit me till later. Like I don't allow the feelings
hmm.
until like 2 or 3 weeks later. I'll be like, if someone passes away in the family or whatever, I'm the one like, you know, kind of everyone's crying and I'm the one that's like, okay, now we need to do this and now we need to, and
Hmm.
and taking care of everybody else. And then I feel like I'm okay, but then again, it feels weird that I'm not feeling anything. And then
Mm.
it does catch up later because I've done some work. Otherwise it probably wouldn't come out at all. I probably would just stuff it and it would come out in other ways.
Well, yeah, yeah. You know what I find really interesting is that you and I connect in this idea of being calm in the chaos. And certainly the idea of being an infant, not knowing where your safety is going to come from, not knowing where your comfort's going to come from, not knowing where your soothing is going to come from, not knowing where your love is going to come from, not knowing where your recognition is going to come from. That's all chaotic. And as I talk to adoptees, I hear a common theme about being calm in that chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I was shot in at one point in my life. Did
Oh
not
my
like it.
gosh.
Did not like it, by the way. But in that moment where the shooting happened, um, step one, get my girlfriend in the car. Step two, get in the driver's side. Step three, drive in this direction, which is going to be away from where the conflict is. And it felt like second nature.
Yeah.
And I believe that that came from my adoptive experience. So when I've held professional roles where chaos is a part of the job, it's been a natural thing that didn't feel like a superpower
Yeah. Yeah.
to roll into that chaos and bring calm to it.
Right. But the problem is with that too is, if you look in nature, when, say, a caribou is getting attacked by a lion and it gets away finally,
Hmm.
right away, it starts shaking and like releasing the trauma that just happened. I mean, that's a natural thing that we don't do as humans. We are trained to do what we've been doing and,
Hmm.
be calm in the storm and get through it. And, we survive that way, but we never really somatically deal with it like
Right.
animals do. And they get rid of it right away. And a couple minutes later, they're back eating grass and, you know,
Right. Right.
and we just don't do that.
I'm often amazed by my dog for the same reason. Yeah, he has that same experience
Yeah.
that isn't second nature to me. But I also recognize the fact that the ability to compartmentalize has been important as I've dealt with chaos, as I've
Hmm.
dealt with loss, as I've dealt with new traumatic experience, to get through those
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
And I attribute that to my birth story and my adoption.
Hmm. And how do you correlate, do you think, for you? How does that correlate?
Well, I certainly see, so many capabilities that came out of my adoption that are uncommon. We've been talking about common to chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I look at your ability to connect with people that are dissimilar to you, and I always see you showing that connection and making that connection so quickly, which is a survival skill if you're an adoptee.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to bet that you don't think of it as a superpower. And every time you show it, I see it as a part of your superpowers.
Mm, mm, thank you.
Mm.
Yeah.
For me, one of the things that I've been told I have, is a special relationship with Google. And I can get results from Google that other people have a hard time with. Well, if you spend your whole life searching either to find where you belong, how you fit, what the right words are to get the response you want. An ability to Google really well is just a natural thing that doesn't
Yeah.
feel like a superpower. It's just what I learned to
Yeah.
do growing up.
Right. Learn to
And I see those
communicate.
kinds.
You know
Yeah,
your audience,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
even if it's
yeah.
Google.
Yeah, but the ability to have that, to celebrate that, to enjoy that, um, isn't something that came out of my family of origin. It's something that was learned long after I was adopted.
Yeah. I think that's what makes me so sad at these adoptees that are struggling so much is them seeing it that these are superpowers that you can, get something positive out of, what you're perceiving as negative. There are positives in there. Um, so in closing, what would you like struggling adoptees to know?
Oh, I'm so glad that, as I've heard you ask this question with others, you've said, what's the one thing? And thank God that I don't have to limit myself to one.
No, you know,
Yeah, no, yeah, number one is that you are loved and you belong. You are loved and you are belong today. Whether you see it and accept it or not, you are loved.
mm,
You're loved by the greatest power in the universe, and that exists today.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
number two, no, number two is, it's okay to outlive a person's past. One of the things that I have on my bathroom wall that I see every day is, this is the year that I've outlived my past.
mm,
And that has happened for me, and that is real for me. And I'm so grateful for that. And the ability to outlive the effects of your family of origin, the effects
yeah,
that have come with not feeling like you belong, the effects of thinking that you don't fit in or don't know how to fit in, the
mm,
thoughts that there's nothing special about you are all things that it's possible to outlive.
Yeah.
And it's possible to see the positives that have come out of that. We've been talking about superpowers for the last couple of minutes, and regardless of where you are, you have a superpower and you have a purpose that only you can fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
You have a purpose in this world that is special and unique
Yeah.
to you. And if you don't have it, if you don't show it, if you don't take it out in the world, nobody gets the benefit of it. And number three, we've talked about service as a part of our conversation. And for me, service is so important in that transformational journey. It helps me see my value to others. It helps me live out my values, right? I think people should be treated with justice. I think people should be treated fairly. I think people should be treated with loving kindness. And service allows me to live that out. And I think every adoptee would benefit from that service being a part of their story as well.
Definitely.
Mm,
Definitely. Yeah.
The last thing I would say is include a partner, whether it's another adoptee, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a sib, whether it is a biological or adopted parent. Don't walk the journey alone.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things that I've heard in life is that when I'm listening to my own thoughts, I'm taking advice from a crazy person.
Yeah.
And for me, it's important to have a partner on the journey. And those partners have increased in number, decreased in number, changed in intimacy, changed in relationship. But walking the journey with a partner has been absolutely crucial for me.
Yeah. Funny you were saying about the thoughts in your head. I saw a TikTok and the girl, she named her thoughts. She named him Deborah. She made it like a whole other persona. And so when the thoughts were going, she's like, "Okay, Deborah, I hear you, but we're not doing that right now. You're getting me too excited. You're making me anxious. So just, but she made like her crazy thoughts, like a whole, like a best friend that was like, talking in her ear.
Oh,
And
I
I mean, it
love
made
that.
so much sense. I was like, wow, that's a pretty good hack right there to kind of slow that down and be like, okay, I hear you, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To build on that, one
yeah,
of the most important things that I've had an opportunity to learn is I can ask Deborah, what you're saying right now is overwhelming me.
yeah,
Can you please not overwhelm me?
yeah.
And for me, that's a really helpful conversation to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that hack.
Mm.
Well, Russell, I enjoyed this conversation today. I'm so glad that you came on the show, and I don't get a lot of late discovery adoptees. So I know there's going to be people out there that are going to resonate with your story. And I love that. That's why I do this show. So thank you so much for coming on today. As a late discovery adoptee, I love how Russell looks at it as his superpower. And I just wonder, do you believe that your adoption experience can be turned into a superpower? Russell and I are living proof that you can do that. And it is possible. It is possible. Just start. Just start your healing process. No matter what it looks like, it can be messy. It doesn't matter. Each stepping stone that you take towards your healing journey is going to be worth it. You're going to learn something either way, whether it was positive or negative. It doesn't matter. Just start. The world is waiting for you to heal so that you can start living your purpose. As always, take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember to mind your own karma. I'll see you next time.